Well, new modelling suggests that if AI drives unemployment to as high as 20% in the next 5 years, as warned by the Anthropic CEO, Australia could face more than $250 billion in annual economic losses and a further 2.4 million people out of work. The analysis raising urgent questions about whether Australia is prepared for the scale of disruption that advanced AI may bring. Let's discuss with futurist and author of Perceptive Machines, Rocky Scopelliti, who joins me now. Rocky, thanks so much for joining ausbiz. Quite some sobering statistics that you've done in your research here.
Yeah, it is indeed. I was curious by that 20% figure that was being thrown around by the CEO there, and I wondered what impact that would have on the Australian economy. And so I used that 20% figure, and it's a very sobering, as you said, set of results. Now, what we've got to remember is, as big as what these numbers are, they're far less than what the overall impact would be when you then account into, what does reduced tax receipts mean in terms of increased welfare expenditure, what mortgage stress would this create on households. So I think the key point here, Juliet, is the time frame, because what these guys are talking about is the next 5 years, right? So it's very sobering, because the question then becomes is, well, how ready is Australia for such drastic unemployment?
So how ready is it? Because you say $250 billion in annual economic impact. I mean, that is a staggering figure. How did you get there?
Yeah, well, that's just basically looking at the economic data from Treasury, the RBA, as well as the ABS, looking at the taxation receipts and other revenues from government as a result of employment and labour usage in the market. And then applying that 20%, I actually ran 3 different scenarios, 8%, 10%, 20%, just to kind of get a feel for the impact. And the impact, irrespective, is very, very hard on the Australian economy. And again, it comes back to this point about time, because 5 years is not a long time. Even if these CEOs are partly right, let's just say 2% or 3%, the flow-on effect in terms of stress across the economy, not just to workforces, but the add-on effect as well. Remember, we've got students coming out of universities, for example, that are stuffed with HECS debt. The impact of the white-collar jobs, which is what they're kind of saying, is going to impact the way they start their employment. And so we could quite easily see the underemployment rate increase significantly as a result.
So you talk there about the disappearance of the first rung of the career ladder. So, a school leaver watching this, or a graduate entering the workforce today, what does that mean? Because I know in my career, for example, how I started out, those jobs don't exist anymore. AI is already doing those.
Yeah, that's right. And this is what's really concerning a lot of students at the moment. I've got 2 kids going through university at the moment, and they are quite concerned about this. And again, it comes back to, do we have an AI displacement national strategy? Is government working with industries? Are they working with major employers to look at, graduate employment guarantees? Are they looking at designing policies specifically for large-scale AI labour market disruption? We can expect these to sort of hit many different industries across many different roles: administration, customer service, contact centres, legal research, junior consulting in major consulting firms and accounting firms. So the breadth of roles in the white collar area, I think, is of major concern.
So we've already seen big moves coming through from big companies. You look at Atlassian, Klarna. So is that the beginning of the disruption? There is a bigger wave through to come, particularly when you look at, small businesses as well relying on AI.
Yeah, so the evidence that this is occurring is already there. And as you mentioned there, Juliet, there's been already major Australian organisations that have made, labour announcements or employment announcements, redundancies and the like due to this technology. But we're only at the very start. And the speed with which this technology is being adopted within organisations is really the concern that we have here. Is that I have no question or doubt that humanity's capacity to adapt will be no different to what it was in prior industrial revolutions, but in the past. That took generations. Technologies took generations and decades to flow through, which gave industries and individuals time to adapt and transition. We don't have that time here if what they're forecasting comes anywhere near into fruition.
But Rocky, can I just play devil's advocate? Because the Industrial Revolution also created jobs that we didn't even know could exist at that point. And you look back at people, riding a horse, for example, versus having a car, and now we've got self-driving cars. I've been to many chats on AI too, where they say for every job that's lost, 2 more that we don't even know about could be created. So is there that side of the argument too, that there are jobs, humans are pretty smart, that we don't even know about yet?
Yeah, absolutely. That is an important part of this whole debate. But the question is, how effective has Australia been in terms of predicting the skills that it requires, in the numbers that it requires, in the industries that it requires? So, for example, when we look at healthcare, we've got a labour shortage in the order of 200,000. In the technology area, again, shortfall in the order of 200,000. When we look at renewable energy, 35,000. Cyber and information security, 5,000. So we've really got to giddy up on, closing the gap between being able to reliably predict what skills we need in the numbers that we need, in the industries that we need, and at the time that we need.
All right, before you go, a quick, chance to talk your book, so to speak, literally as well, because you've written a book called Perceptive Machines. Sorry. So AI doesn't just think, sees, hears, and predicts. So how does that change the threat somewhat?
Yeah, so, the central argument of perceptive machines is that AI is evolving beyond automation, which is the current area of focus. And machines are increasingly being able to see through computer vision, hear through advanced speech, detect patterns in human behaviour, and predict outcomes. And so the next wave of disruption may therefore come not as a result from machines that think better than humans, but from machines that perceive systems more effectively than humans.